Welcome to the Floor Academy podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Hedin, owner of Illustrious Hardwoods in Mesa, Arizona. With me this week is Bob Baldocchi of On3, which provides digital training solutions for the flooring industry. And we're going to get into talking about e-commerce and how that can help your retail business. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. The Floor Academy podcast is here to provide you with the business education that I did not see abundantly available in this industry. We are great at pushing hand skills for contractors, and I think that's a wonderful thing that you can go and further what you can provide homeowners with. But I saw a lot of people struggling to be able to move their business forward, how to be profitable, how to train employees, how to run the numbers on the back end, how to implement systems and processes. Floor Academy is here to help you hear those discussions with other successful business owners within this industry, people that participate in it on one level or another. And we want to help you build the back end of your business so that you can be more successful, run a better business, hopefully put in less hours, and instead of owning a job, you will end up owning an asset that you can one day sell and move forward with. So that's what we're here doing. Like I said, I appreciate everybody tuning in. Check out the YouTube, find us on your favorite listening app, like, subscribe, leave a comment. Tell a friend for me. Go out there and let the guy that you're standing next to at the supply house in the morning know what Floor Academy's done for you. Help us spread the word. Bob, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining me.
Happy to be here, Kyle. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So let's hear your 30,000 foot overview. You've done a lot of things and been involved in a few different places.
No, I appreciate it. My career has been, it's been blessed. I've spent a good 25 plus years in consumer products mainly. I graduated from the University of California at Berkeley and then went into the world of retail where I was a buyer and managed large big box stores, and then moved into Disney consumer products with the global licensing business, and then worked with brands like Seiko. After that, before joining Emser Tile, where I was 15 years as their CMO, head of business development, and really, focusing, we were a multi-segment business that handled home builder, commercial, retail, mass merchants, e-commerce, which is a business that, that I helped the company launch. Mm-hmm. And then, retired from Emser Tile and started a real estate investment company, which is I'm still doing today, called B6 Holdings, and then was kind of pulled out of retirement with a company called On3, which is back in the industry, solving a problem that I really felt like was during my tenure at Emser was a real problem in the industry, and that was training and education with our field level teams. And what On3 does is it basically takes it's a construction training built by the industry for the industry. And it basically takes micro learning modules into multimedia platforms, quick hit 5-minute segments where it leaves them with field guides that are at their disposal at all times. And it really has got a solution-based training mechanism to get people onboarded faster, help with retention, and really turn our trades from just employees into experts. And that's really what got me, was the idea of getting these guys, trained up. And once they're experts, people don't leave the industry, as you know. You're a flooring guy, you're a flooring guy.
Yeah.
Once you're in, you're in. Window guy, yeah. So, or a person. So, yeah, once you're in, you're in. And we want to keep more people in this industry
for sure,
and retain them. And so that's a big part of what we're doing.
Awesome. That's definitely what we need. We need some young blood, and we need retained young blood. So any way we can get people in and properly educated on not only the proper hand skills, but the proper installation techniques and why it needs to be that way would be amazing. In fact, I was looking at a project this morning, and I was out there to bid doing like an accent wall, and I'm walking down their long hallway, and I noticed some gaps in the floor. I'm like, hey, are these normal? Do these happen all the time? And they're like, oh yeah, we had the guy out. He says, just kick them back together. And I look up, and there's this giant window that faces east, and so the morning sun in Arizona just blasts through this window onto the floor, and I was like, you know what? I was like, get up there, put some tint on that window, and it should help this from expanding and contracting so much. And they're just looking like, wait, what? I'm like, well, you got to know all the things about the floor, right? So that's the important thing is just because you can put it together doesn't mean you're an installer, in my opinion. We've got to know the hows and the whys of how the flooring works. Plus, let's get you this back end business side and really start moving you forward. And then if you can get your guys in the field using training modules or whatever, and they're learning the hows and the whys plus the actual hand skills, everyone's going to be more successful. And we want the homeowner to be, or the end user, we want them to be happy with the end result. And if we can get there easier because we have the know-how, super important. There's too many people running around just willy-nilly, and it makes the rest of the industry look bad.
Well, it's huge, and by the way, they're the ones that are going to bail on you very quickly, and they're going to be gone from the industry because they didn't have success, and so, and then, you call them up and they're gone, and you call the next guy to fix it, or the next lady to fix it, and so you really have these issues where, we really need to educate and get people up to speed in terms of what they're doing.
We do, for sure. It is an important mission and goal, and it's nice to see people out there working on it. So we're here. We want to talk about e-commerce, and while you were at Emser, you helped implement the e-commerce side of what they're doing these days. We initially spoke, and I've always been intrigued by. I like selling materials. I can make a little bit of extra money as an installer doing that. I now have this little boutique shop that I'm running. And the thought of e-commerce has always intrigued me, but it was how much more work is it going to be to implement, one, receiving all these incoming inquiries, but then two, to get a shipping company to go pick up these pallets for me, get them where they're going when there's already huge online businesses selling flooring and they're like free shipping and their margins are super low. So I don't even know where to start. This is where you're the expert. So where do we start? Yeah. Why would somebody even want to jump into this e-commerce game, and what would that kind of start looking like?
Well, and I think that's really where the question starts, to your point. So, e-commerce to me is multifaceted. People have this idea that e-commerce is Amazon, and it's built, and it's these big, large companies, as you stated, and you've got to compete with them out there potentially. But e-commerce could also be a way of expanding your marketplace within your local marketplace, where you're connecting with people offline versus inside the store. And so, the way I would kind of tell people to start with the e-commerce exercise is to really kind of understand what you want to be when it comes to e-commerce. Do you really want to be an e-commerce company where you set up a website, you facilitate and take orders, and you ship them anywhere, anytime, right? Mm-hmm. So that's one form of e-commerce.
Okay.
The other form of e-commerce is to take your retail footprint, your brick and mortar footprint, and expand the way in which you connect with people through an e-commerce site. And that e-commerce site can be selling, it can be marketing, it could have pricing on there, it could have the ability to kind of capture appointments, whatever you want it to be, but it could really be just an extension of that brick and mortar presence that enables you to not just rely on people walking through their front door to capture a sale. And that's a very different exercise on e-commerce if you're a retailer out there today. And some people do it really, really well. And others kind of struggle with it because, they don't build the right infrastructure and so forth. But the first step, kind of where we started, was decide what you want to be in the e-commerce space. And, I would highly recommend to people that, unless they're really prepared for that infrastructure or that freight part or whatever, that I would kind of push them more towards the direction of expand your presence, bring people from the e-commerce into your brick and mortar to facilitate transactions like you do today.
Okay.
But just expand your eyeballs, on your business.
Okay. So let me ask this question. So because I opened up this little retail shop On my website, all I had my web guy do was I was like, hey man, I carry these collections. I was like, here's all the websites. Go to that manufacturer's site and steal all these images for me and then make me the pages for my page. I've gotten multiple inquiries lately of like, hey, you carry this, like, is it in stock, or how much does it run a square foot, or where can I come and see it? So is that kind of the thing you're talking about, of expanding that presence and footprint?
For sure. So that's a good one. That's a good place to start. And because in that environment, you pick your partners, right? So as the retailer, you're deciding which partners that you want to highlight on an e-commerce platform that you get out into the marketplace. And by doing that, you're relatively comfortable and familiar with those brands, with those vendors. And so when you put their brand up online and they comes from calls and says, hey, can I get this? You now can facilitate what you would do normally as they walk through the front door. You can quote them, you can give them pricing, you can give them delivery timelines, even if you have to get back to them. So you can have that call to action, so to speak, that's coming through that site. But then you can expand from there, where you can actually start integrating some of those elements into an online experience with the customer, where they don't have to pick up the phone and call. So, your first step is that let me get your attention and direct you as a call to action to pick up the phone and call me, which is what they're doing, which is great, right? They wouldn't have called otherwise, right? So the next step is to integrate some more of those elements into the process, where you can start quoting price, or you can start setting up, job site, quotes, or you can go measurements quotes. So you can start setting those things up online, where the appointment that comes through is somebody looking for 1,200 square feet, and they actually want an installation appointment, and they've actually booked it through your site. So that you can kind of layer the elements that you want once you kind of start the platform, and as it fits your business.
Okay. Well, and that's what I found really interesting, was that I think I'm listed as a dealer on one of the manufacturer's websites, like when people do a zip code search. And so that's one way. But I think a lot of what's been happening is people are like, they're finding a floor and then they're putting it into, Google or whatever they're using. And because Google's now crawled my page and they see that, like, okay, he's in Mesa, he has this floor and it's on his website, just because they're near me, I'm now attracting more they're almost like mini landing pages and drawing in more attention, which has been nice. And then they're sending in the email inquiry, and I can look up and say, hey, it's this price. If you want to come down and look at samples, we can do all that. And I have gotten a couple of consultations out of it, that's great. I made one little change and I didn't have to do the work. I just called hey, like, add this stuff for me, and it's generating more business. The pricing is another factor. I think that would be interesting to put on there. Just now they can see what it costs up front. They don't have to make that phone call or inquiry. How do you feel? Obviously, like, I'm not a sell on price guy. I'm a sell on experience. And I like being one of the expensive guys in my market. I'm going to bring different value than other people. So how can we convey the value that we bring when people are just looking at a product online via e-commerce? And so my product's going to be more expensive. I have more overhead, and I want to run a higher profit margin than, say, Joe Schmo's online flooring depot, where they're bottom of the barrel, low margins, high volume. So
there's a couple ways you do that, right? One is, it all starts with, I think, again, goes back to what I'll talk about, the anatomy of the transaction, right? Where does it start? Where does it end? And when, in this case, you're talking about a website that someone's gone to, they've seen, and they're trying to make a decision in terms of what they want, in terms of how they want to follow up. Okay, so the first thing I would say is that the presence of that website has to convey what you're talking about, your message, your branding statement. And if your branding statement is price, and your branding statement is quality, service, some other elements, right? Installation, expertise, it's craftsmanship, whatever that story is, you have to find a way to tell that story very quickly on the front end of that without turning people off. If you really want to go super high end, without turning them off and going, oh, this guy's going to be $1 bazillion and I can't shop there. But you want to convey that message that's important to you early on in the process. The other thing I'd say is that, there's rating services and getting feedback as it relates to what you do. And, and getting ratings, it's been proven that if you're on e-commerce and people kind of go to a site and they go, well, there's reviews, there's reviews and ratings, that all you need is a handful of really good reviews before that trust factor jumps in and people say, hey, I'm on this site. I see that they've got 25 reviews. It's 4.5 stars. I'm going to keep looking, right? Versus I'm on this site. There's 3 reviews and it's got 2.5 stars, and the complaints are they never called me back. Then I'm going to probably move on to the next one. So that component of that messaging early on and how people see you as they kind of jump on, they're only going to give you a few seconds before they could make that decision. So I would say that that's where you start.
Okay, which I totally agree. I think reviews have helped me build my brand like nothing else, because it's not you saying it, it's somebody else saying it about you, and then having them, I have some on Facebook, I have some on Google, I have some on Yelp, they're spread around, and people can read them, and then they're just, oh, okay, I got it. Like, he goes above and beyond, or he does this. Going back to the pricing part of it and trying to convey that message really quick. If these pages currently only have pictures of the flooring on them, so if I add in pricing and that's what they're able to Google I need this brand and this collection, this name, Mesa, my website pops up and now has pricing on it. They're just seeing a picture that I carry that collection. So how do you spice up that page, or how do you draw them into using a different menu bar to pull down and learn something about you, so that price doesn't scare them away, right? What are we going to have to do to spice that up and make the value clear there?
Content. And so, the biggest thing that you can do on a website, in my opinion, is layer content in. So if you've got a single photo of something, it's fine. People are going to look at it. But if your photo has an installation shot with it, if it's got, it's got angled shots, angled photography, et cetera. If you've got multiple things going on where someone can actually go beyond the one, because look, our industry, the flooring industry was in some ways fairly difficult to sell online, especially certain categories of it. If you're looking at just, straight up flooring, it all kind of looks the same when it's just a single piece. If it's hardwood and you've got a certain, grain of hardwood, everybody's kind of looks the same. But as there's technical differences between brands and thicknesses or whatever that technical differences is. Yep. That's got to get communicated. So what I would tell people is that if you want to go beyond just, hey, I see a picture and a price, have additional content behind that original picture, so that people can see more about it. They can see technical aspects to it. Let's say you're selling quality. Maybe what you want to do is you want to highlight the quality of that particular item differently than just a photo, so that people know that they're buying quality versus price. And then the second thing is, when you can show people, multiple images of how it's going to look inside their environment, that's a key for people. Like my wife, for example, will tell me she can't shop flooring online. She just can't do it because, and I was in the business forever, and she's like, I have to see it installed. I just don't know what I'm looking at. I could look at a piece of product and kind of say, I know how it's going to look installed, but for her, she really struggled with that. And she said, and we did lots of remodels recently from the other side of the business, and she's like, I just need to see it installed. Where do you have a picture of it installed? So, we would go through that exercise. So content and layering more content, the more content, the better. And also, I think it sometimes helps with search too, because people are clicking on the more screens, and then all of a sudden you've got this search component happening where you're getting more clicks and people are getting deeper into your sites, which helps the algorithm, so to speak, in terms of how people are actually then getting your site when it comes up next time.
Okay. Yeah, the visualizer software that's come out online to like digitally take a picture and then overlay the floor into your house has been a game changer for people. I think with flooring, it not everyone has that ability to look at something and see it. And so when you, okay, I can see a square or a picture of a sample board and I can see the different colors, but what is this actually going to look like in my space is it's hard. So if there's any way you can get that working on your website, I think that's going to be really big in moving this forward and helping you continue to sell. Different images. Can you reach out to these? Like when you were with Emser, if I would have reached out and said, do you have pictures of this that I can use on my website from different angles and not just the like sample image, did you have things like that you could provide your individual dealers with, or was that something that they would have to acquire on their own?
No, we did, and a lot of them will look. The way the e-commerce space works is you have, obviously you have your Amazons, you have in our space you have Build.com, you have Wayfair, you have some of these key players within the space kind of really managing and doing a big chunk of that e-commerce business as relates to the flooring category. They all have the best in class. Or even Lowe's and Home Depot, for example, they all have the best in class as relates to what it looks like on a website. And so that best in class is about the content that you're providing to them. So most of the companies, if they're working with a Home Depot, they're working with a Lowe's, they're working with a Wayfair or a Build, they will have these images, these additional assets, we just call them, and hopefully they've got it in a way that they've built it. And this is what we did, where we built it in a way that made them shareable pretty easily.
Okay.
If we with the right partner. Now, not every, but we had rules about our partners, right? And I think a lot of people would have rules around their partners. And so this is where it goes back to, what are you trying to be in terms of the e-commerce space? So if we had a partner who was doing a retail space and trying to do an extension within their marketplace, we would help them and work with them and provide them a lot of assets and things because they were a customer and that order was coming through their retail shop. If they were an independent e-commerce provider and they had no physical presence, we may or may not give them all those assets so they can go out there into the marketplace and maybe disrupt, because our retail partners are important to us.
Okay.
And so we were very protective of that retail partnership that we had in the marketplace because we had tens of thousands of retail partners, and we didn't want to disrupt that by having a bunch of, e-commerce only entities that are, guys working from garages or companies working from garages that we're trying to ship all over the country, or even try to utilize our infrastructure to ship all over the country. So we were careful about it, and we qualified. So, but yes, if you were a qualified partner, we would absolutely help you with the assets. And I would think most companies would want to do that because the more you sell, the more orders they get.
Okay, so I'm building out these separate pages and showcasing the products I have, put some pricing, get a little story in there, use more assets to kind of explain, highlight maybe some technical details, not dryly, but build it kind of into the story of why it's a better product. Like I will deal with more of the top end stuff. I don't have any, like, if I sell a lot of luxury vinyl plank, and so everything has a 20 mil wear layer. They're all SPC products. There's no 6 or 12 mil products in there. I don't want to deal with them. There's no WPCs. There's no traditional LVP. Like, this is where I want to be. This is what I'm claiming is like the best of the best. And that's what I'm selling on, is I'm going to give you the best experience with the best products possible. So now I've got to find a way to bring that onto those pages that I've created detailing the product, it sounds like, and then put it kind of all together in a little story, and then be able to, if they still want more info, they can go search the website and find more info. But instead of just having a picture with a price, there's at least more detail going on this page now.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, and on top of that, listen, you just created a story right there when you were talking about 20 mil, kind of wear layers, and that's a key factor for you, and the reasons why it is. And so, that's a space, the LVP product line, has been one of the most complicated product lines for the consumer to really understand what they're buying, because there's been so many iterations of that product line. And so, and things look alike, but again, they're not all created equally. And so,
Yeah.
if that's a big part of your business, one of the things I'd be explaining to customers is, why are you looking for something that's got these characteristics in it, and telling that story. So you're not only kind of getting people to shop, but you're educating them throughout the process and becoming their resource to the information. And then once people feel like, I believe this very strongly, once people find you as a resource that helped them through a process, they're kind of more loyal. They're more committed to you and they'll work with you, even if you're 20 cents higher.
Mm-hmm.
You help them understand the exercise, and they trust you. So they'll pay a little bit more for that trust. And so you can convey those elements of training and education and cut through the nonsense that's out in the marketplace about what people are getting and what they're not getting. And then when it comes to installation, it's a whole nother game. But that to me is a story all to its own, because you've got a point of view on it.
Mm-hmm.
And the point of view is very clearly driven around quality and dependability of these products. And a customer coming onto your site needs to feel that you're the one that's going to help them understand that. I've had so many phone calls from friends saying, "What I'm going to put I'm going to put this luxury vinyl plank or these, into my home. What do I do?"
Mm-hmm.
And I would tell them, "Look, these are the 4 or 5 things you're looking for in the specs." And they would, if you want to do that. Otherwise, would you have dogs? Do you have kids? Where are you putting it? What's the application? Where is it going?
Yes.
And we would have that conversation, and I'd say, "Okay, great. You need to do this. You need to look for this type of product."
Mm-hmm.
And I would do the same thing. It'd be the wear layer, it'd be the thickness, it'd be whatever it was. And
Well, I love that you're big into the storytelling, because for me, like, that's one of the things that I have a film background. I used to work in reality television, and so that was a natural thing for me to bring into flooring when I started, was telling these stories of how I completed a project and stuff. But then I found Donald Miller, who wrote a fabulous book called Story Brand, and it's making the client be like this hero in the journey, right? Like, everyone wants to sell themselves, and I want to be the hero, but when you can make the client be the hero and you're like their guide, which is what you're saying to do, is like, I need to educate them and give them the knowledge so that they can be successful and have this great experience. I love that. Like, I am 100% on board with this message, because it's so much easier. People will pay more, as you said, when you provide them with this easy experience and you're holding their hand through it and carrying them through, and they feel that you're really bringing that extra value to the table. It's not this quick transaction of, let's just get in there, measure it, get them a quote, free installation, and here we go. Like, what am I getting? Like, what's actually happening? So I trying to find a way. Like, now I need to go back and find time to look at everything I've rolled out recently and really switch it up and try and make it sell a little bit better. And I hope that works. So let's change.
Well, by the way, that's my Disney background, right? The storytelling, right?
Yeah,
so that goes
sure.
back from branded storytelling. It was all about that. So, I've always felt strongly about it, to your point. And but listen, keep going. Yeah, we'll keep going, and I'm sure you're. Yeah.
Well, no, if you have something to add, because I'm sure, like, I find it. Well, let's dig in there a little bit. Okay, so if that's the background that you kind of got with doing licensing and stuff for Disney and putting it on watches and being able to move them, I mean, essentially, like, as a buyer, here's what I envision when I hear that title. Like, you were told, like, here's X amount of dollars, go find us the most bang for our buck on these things that we can slap an image of Tinkerbell on and sell them to, little children all around the world, right? Like,
yeah.
Where did the storytelling of having to, like, find the watch manufacturer that can slap Tinkerbell on come in? Like, how?
Right.
Where was that translation?
It's interesting because at Disney, it wasn't just about putting characters on products, right? And I'll give a quick example. So when I was one of the things that I used to tell people that there was a decision tree at Disney that was actually very easy. The first question was it good for the brand? And if it was good, and if the answer to that question was yes, then the conversation could continue in terms of what we kind of did from there.
Mm-hmm.
And, as a licensing executive, we were really more of a consumer product. We turned ourselves more into a consumer products company where we were working with the biggest retailers in the world. We're working with Walmart, we're working with Nordstrom's and everybody in between. And we were trying to get them to understand the value of that brand out at retail and why people coming in and why kids' eyes would light up when they saw the Disney scripted logo. And they couldn't read, but they could recognize the word Disney in the scripted logo. And so their eyes would light up. They'd see a character, whether it's Tinkerbell or Mickey Mouse or Winnie the Pooh, and they would just get so excited over what they were looking at. And then it turned into execution of that brand where you're saying, look, quality, right price, right quality for the right environment. And so we did have to kind of pull these things together. But when you talked about, when we were trying to pick partners and so forth, a lot of it had to do with quality. Could they handle the manufacturer? Could they actually do the reporting? We were way ahead on the social side in places like overseas in China where we had U.S. standards in place in factories that we would audit.
Okay.
That would say, you had to do it, because the worst thing you could do is go into a factory that was not handled well. So a reporter would walk in, they'd see a bunch of Disney stuff coming off the line. That'd be front, New York Times, hey, sweatshops, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So we avoided that like plague. And so that brand integrity component of it was critical. And my favorite story was I was approached by Zippo, once upon a time, Zippo lighters.
Okay.
And they're like, I will give you a huge guarantee if we can use the Disney characters on Zippo lighters. And that went back to the brand discussion. And I said,
first
no.
question is a no. Yeah, you're done.
And I said, no. And he goes, well, what are you talking about? I'll give you, you'll make $10 million on this deal. And I said,
wow,
you don't understand. $10 million was a rounding figure to the Walt Disney Company. I don't care. It doesn't matter. It's a rounding figure. That $10 million won't do anything to offset the brand exposure you're going to make and hurt a 20, 30, 40 billion dollar brand at the time. It's not worth it. So it was an easy pass because Mickey Mouse doesn't smoke and I'm not putting him on a Zippo lighter. And so the answer is no. So thank you. But those are the kinds of things that we got into because I couldn't tell that story, and so so it was an easy no, even though it was a lot of revenue. And so that's kind of where, brand integrity kind of starts playing into it. You have to know who you are. And then I tell the same story now. As a company, at Emser, we had to know who we were in the marketplace and the story we wanted to tell about who we were in the marketplace. And we were privately held and, family run. And there's a great story about how the brothers started it. And the name Emser was the 5 initials of the brothers. We had a great story. But we're also built on service and we were built on selection and value. We called value. It's more about being fair and not necessarily cheap. It was not the right value. So we had the service, selection, quality, value kind of proposition that we took to the industry. And over 15 years, we went from the kind of the best known secret in the industry because nobody really knew who Emser was to a really up in front of the curtain, high profile brand for the flooring industry that serviced home builder and so forth. But that was part of the storytelling as we kind of emerged over those 15 years. And I think all brands have the ability to tell a story. They just need to figure out what that story is, right? And they need to understand what their proposition is. And once they do that, then they have the mediums to tell the story, whether it's their people, whether it's e-commerce, whether it's through social media. Now you got your platforms that you want to kind of convey this story and you want to be consistent about it. So that's why story is so important to me. Is because every brand has one, whether they know it or not.
Yeah.
And how they bring it to market then is the challenge. And whether they've got the capabilities or the mediums, et cetera, to kind of do it properly. But and then people often confuse, but story is also culture. Your brand story is your culture in a large way in terms of how you kind of convey yourself, not only internally, but externally to the marketplace.
So much in there.
I know.
Stop. Everybody stop. Go back, rewind, listen to all of that again. I'm not even lying. That is so good. It is so profound. It's a matter. You're right. Once again, I say it all the time on this program is that contractors are great with their hands, not so great with the business side of things. And so it's always, hey, I can install tile. I can install hardwood. I can sand and finish it. I can put the carpet in, whatever. That's not what you do. That's one thing you do, but that's not what you're selling. You are selling an experience to these folks. You are changing their home. You're giving them their dream. Go sell that and build a story around that for them, as opposed to, I can kick it in, or I can put it in, and the hand skills are very important, folks. I get it. It is the least important thing to the person looking at you that wants to hire you. It is assumed that you have the hand skills to do it because you're the one running the business. You're supposed to be a professional. Now wow them with all these other things. So when you telling a story, the minute you said Zippo, I was like, yeah, that's a no, right? If the question is this good for the brand, for Disney to be on cigarettes these days? No, it's not great to be on lighters or anything like that. The only person I can really think of that smokes in any Disney movie is Cruella de Vil. And maybe the lady in Rescuers Down Under too. But it's like, right. It's not something you see a lot, and that's not something you're gonna promote. If it was the 20s, I mean, actually, from the book I read on Disney, doesn't he tried to never have a picture with a cigarette in his mouth, if I remember correctly. Like, even though he was a huge smoker, like, I can't be photographed that way. So yeah, image matters, and it's going to help you sell. That's, man.
And if you make it, if you pull it forward to the industry, right, in terms of what that looks like, there's ways in which people can articulate this, and I agree with you that, again, gosh, 15 years ago, it was really, you really didn't have a lot of this social media. You didn't have these e-commerce components, and so contractors and retailers and so forth, it was very much, let me sell this to you, I'll come in and install it. It was in some ways a simpler business in that respect. You had a local shop. You were the provider for that marketplace, that community. It was good. And then in the home building and the commercial industries, you had your known entities, and there weren't that many of them, and they could handle the work that was kind of out there. So, but you fast forward today, and now you've got such a presence out there, both online and socially, where people really do need to figure out how to differentiate themselves in terms of what people are looking for. And the thing that, drives consumer satisfaction, especially on the retailer side of things, we know is that dependability, communication and dependability, and how we interact with our clients today. And to your point, a lot of these grew up in the industry, and they're like, I don't like people. I don't want to interact with them, right? I just want to install floors, right? And you're like, well, unfortunately today, you might get that job to install that floor, but that referral business, which is what this industry really needs to rely on in some ways, is so critical. But if the answer was he showed up, the contractor, he or she showed up when they wanted to, 2 hours late, sometimes didn't show up at all, they didn't return phone calls promptly. We had some issues with the installation, and it took them 2 weeks to get back to us, and then they denied it. They didn't really want to deal with it because they didn't feel like it was their problem, because their quality, they felt good about their install. And you have this experience, right? That's the kind of the extreme, the negative end of it. People aren't going to come back to it. Versus, and by the way, the floor probably was fine, right? The floor might have been fine and whatever. But because you had these other negative experiences throughout the process, now you got nitpicking going on the end of the process. Versus the person who quoted you correctly, was prompt with responses, showed up on time, was clean, left a clean work environment, interacted with the customer when the customer needed it, finished the job, clearly communicated changes when it had to happen in terms of what those expenses would be, and then finished the job and left a clean environment on the back end. There's going to be a lot less nitpicking, and they're going to refer you to a friend because they're like, wow, this person this is not my person. This is the person I'm going to rely on for this particular trade or this industry. those are two very different experiences.
Yes.
And so now you get customers who are now singing your praises. They're talking about what you do. And this is where e-commerce will come back. The e-commerce comes into play. Now you've got a social presence online where you want to get testimonials. You want to get people kind of following your Instagram. You want to get people to kind of look at your Facebook page. You want to get people to kind of post to Pinterest with things that are jobs that you did in your quality. And so now if you've got a good mindset on that social the social component of the workplace, you'll not only get more images. So now you want images, you want back end, you'll get customers' images you'll take online. And by the way, if you're going to take an image of a finished floor, invest in a decent camera, right? Get the latest iPhone. Do something where you can get a good shot of what your work is and communicate it well, and get those things posted, and then get your customers to actually talk about you a little bit. This is where Airbnb and places like VRBO have really nailed it, because you're going onto these sites looking for a home to go rent, and all you're doing is looking at the testimonials from the people that came before you, right?
Oh,
if the flooring industry, right? And and you're looking for that 5-star house or that 4.95-star house to go rent, but you're reading the reviews, communicated well, place was spotlessly clean, a couple little extras in there that I wasn't expecting, and that's what's making consumers kind of say, well, then I'll stay in that place too. They've got 40 reviews. They're all fantastic. The testimonials are amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know anything about the person renting me this house. I don't know anybody. I can only see from pictures, but I'm going to trust the people that came before. Well, the flooring industry and retail has to be the same way. And the more you can get people in front of those testimonials, and the more you can get your customers to kind of say and sing your praises, whether you do it through social media, whether you do it on a Facebook page, whether you do it on an Instagram kind of feed, you will get you'll get repeat business. And this is how you have to integrate this into your story online.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not good at it, hire somebody who is. I mean, there's a couple of great individuals out there that focus on the flooring industry who are phenomenal social media individuals, right?
You can plug her. Who is it? Who introduced us?
Shannon Vogel, man. Shannon Vogel reads social. I mean, if you want to do social, you call Shannon and you figure out how to do social with her, because she'll help you tell your story. Because look, I could do it, but shoot, I even love working with Shannon. But I've got a background in this.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're a flooring contractor and you don't have time for it, you're probably not good at it. So hire an expert and spend the money, because that's really where you're going to get that referral business. And all it takes is 2 referrals, and the next thing you know, your social campaign has been paid for. But so I digress a little bit, but it does go back to trust in this marketplace, and I think e-commerce and the online presence plays a big role in that, because you have to reach them. And because now, if you have a storefront, what do you do with your storefront that kind of separates and tells that story? You can do these same things physically at a retail location, and sometimes it's even a little bit easier. You can train your people in terms of how they greet. You can change your people in terms of how they interact, how they follow up. You can get onto these lead gen platforms where you put everything in there. And there's forced follow up, et cetera. You can do all that, right? But if you're going to rely on that external voice, that online presence voice, you need to make sure it's a complete voice, and that you're not just an item with the price tag up there, because there's too many of them up there.
Well, and that's, I love where this conversation's gone. This is not at all where I expected this conversation to go, but I'm thoroughly enjoying it. And I love how this conversation about e-commerce has turned into really your online presence. You having a website, you having a Facebook page for your business, you being on Yelp, having wherever you're at, like that's you digitally selling. And I don't know that I've ever really thought about it. I've thought about it as like having a brand and having marketing, but you're always selling. And so I like it's making me rethink how I put some stuff out there, and goes back to contractors great with hands, not great with the other stuff all the time. There is so much more going on with your business that needs to be considered than, well, I can do it for $5,000. Can you do it for $4,500? Yeah, I can do that. Stop selling on price. You're too valuable to sell on price, and there's already people doing it. Let the box stores do that. Okay, that's what they're great at. They're going to sell on volume. They want to sell on price. If you're running your own little boutique kind of deal, or you're running a couple of crews, like as I'm trying to scale up and make that happen, you're better off selling on value, experience, customization. There's so much more you can offer that you can change, that you don't have to be focused on price. You can be more expensive and make it happen. And that's what I want to see happen. I gotta interrupt this real quick, and then I'll let you jump into it.
Absolutely.
Okay. The International Surface Event, the annual flooring, stone, and tile sourcing experience in Las Vegas, has a unique experience for the industry. Introducing the Surfaces Show Home, Caliboo Vineyard by Jennifer Farrell. Surfaces is working with celebrity design and TV host Jennifer Farrell to develop a 7,300 square foot show home in California. The home is under construction, but due to the technology from Visualizer Plus, the industry can experience virtual room reveals each month. Then, plan to view Caliboo Vineyard in person or virtually summer 2022 during the home tours. Visit www.caliboovineyard.com now to sign up and join the journey. Okay. Go ahead. Jump in, Bob.
I forget what we were talking about now. Sorry.
I know it's my fault. I know. I got to get it in there. So we've got to be able to not sell on price, right? We're having this smaller guys like myself, and even I think some larger retail stores, even if they're running multiple crews.
Yeah.
Oftentimes I see a lot of stuff. I'm worried about my competition. Stop it. What do you offer that's different?
Yeah. And I would tell people right now it's probably one of the most unique times that I've seen in my time with this industry, is that I don't want to say price is out the window, because everyone's experienced the price increases, they've experienced delays, they've experienced the issues that have kind of gone on in the industry right now. But what price will never go out the window, but what really is taken front and center is reliability and the ability to actually get the job done. So if you're a company out there that actually will service, can call, can kind of respond and get your materials and get on site, price should be the last thing out of your conversation right now, because you're actually way ahead of the game. Because there's a lot of companies out there that are either on, side note, but every industry is doing it. I had a little fender bender and went to the shop, and the guy's like, that fender is 3 months on back order.
Jeez.
And we all kind of looked at each other and went, oh, okay. Like it was like nothing. I'm like,
yeah.
3, 4, a year or 2 years ago, we've been like, are you kidding me? Come on, figure it out. That's not acceptable. But
yes.
Now it's like, oh, well, I guess we have to wait. So our industry has really kind of taken that hit, where people have just gotten comfortable with a couple factors. One is it costs more, which is unfortunate. 2, there's delays, and things are on back order, and you'll have to maybe reselect. And so these things that used to be these dirty words, almost like these crazy unspeakables in the industry, price increase, delays, reselect, are all kind of commonplace, unfortunately, I think, to a large degree. And I'm hoping it goes back to where people can kind of levy expectations that says, I want a fair price, I want you to be able to deliver now, and I want it to be in stock. I think we should get back to that to some degree. But today it's not there. And so for right now, if you're in the industry, you can set a standard for, I'm going to sell on quality, and price is the price. It is what it is. But I'm going to sell on quality. But you have to back it up with the brand and the story, and you have to back it up with your reliability and dependability, so that with that higher price, people should be thinking, I'm going to give better service.
Yes.
I'm going to communicate better. I'm going to white glove this a little bit more, because maybe I can make a little bit more right now, but I'm also going to communicate expectations all along the way. So even if there is delays and even if there is back orders, that customer is so connected to me and knowing exactly where they stand. And it's not just I took the order and I called you 3 months later and said, "Oh, I think it's in. Can we schedule the install?" That's a frustrating experience for the consumer on the other side. So
Yes.
So I do think people should be getting away from selling on price right now. But if they don't back it up with selling on service and quality, then they're right back to price.
I agree. And I mean, the key word, I say this a lot, is that you said fair. Well, to me, fair is in the eye of the beholder. So you may not think your price is fair and that you're expensive, but don't put what you think about something on the person that you're selling to. The other part of that is that if you deliver on what you said you would do for the price you agreed upon, how are you ripping anyone off? There's people that come along, "I can't believe you charge that amount. That's so much money. You're ripping off that client." Why? If I told them I would do X, Y, and Z for X amount of dollars and they said yes, and I deliver on everything I said, then I didn't rip them off. That was what we agreed upon. That's what our contract stated. I've listened to this podcast recently and they talked about moving zeros, right? So you can sell one item for $1 million, or you can sell $1,001 items, or you start moving the zeros around and maybe I sell $110,000 items. That's a lot more feasible to hit $1 million in revenue, especially within this industry, right? So if I'm moving these zeros around, how long would it take me to sell a 1,000 square foot floor for $1 million? Is it possible to do? I mean, maybe I can convince somebody to do that in a couple of years, right? And I'm just out there just constantly trying to find this buyer for this $1 million floor. And I get it. Well, okay, great. I hit my payday. I have money to live on. Maybe I can go spend another couple of years and do it. Well, that's maybe not the best business model right now starting out. So how do I move the zeros around to find the thing that allows me to do it? And you may be slightly more expensive than some people in your area, but that's okay. Don't get hung up on what everyone else is doing. I know the discussions all the time are, how much do you charge? What are you charging in your area? And then I'm in rural area over here and you're in New York. Yes, there's going to be some differences. But that doesn't mean that you can't be the most expensive guy in your area. Now, granted, that's going to have to come with great hand skills. It's going to have to come with great education on all the back end stuff and moisture testing and, how to get the job prepped properly and give them a complete finish. It's going to have to come with delivering on quality to the client and making sure you communicate, keep their house clean. It's this whole package. It's not just going and selling at a higher value because you can put that price on it. You have to develop an entire package. And I think that's often left out is everyone sits here and charge more, charge more, charge more. Well, you can only charge more if you provide an entire package. It's not just about saying, well, I'm going to put this tile on this shower wall and it's $15 a square foot now.
Right.
Why is it $15 a square foot? What do I get with that $15 a square foot?
Well, and like I said, so there's cost is a funny conversation for me because there's first cost and then there's complete cost, right? And if you've ever done a remodel project, you know that sometimes you finish the project and you've got to actually have people come back and actually fix some stuff, and sometimes it costs you additional monies and so forth. Mm-hmm. In the home builder industry, for example, that's a big conversation because, when they install floors for the home building industry, if the homeowner moves into that property and sees issues like cracked grout or they didn't quite like the way that the baseboards were done or whatever it is, mm-hmm. and the home builder warrants that house, which they do and they should, they'll bring their contractor back out onto that property to kind of fix the issues that were had. And so people say, well, we charge X to install that floor and that's kind of our price. And I used to tell builders, I said, well, that's great, but how many times did people have to go back in? Because that's cost. And they're like, well, the subs picked it up. I'm like, no, the subs may have picked it up because that's part of your agreement, but that sub wasn't on your next house. So it's an opportunity loss. So there's costs associated. Every time you have to come back, there's associated cost to it. So we used to talk about the total cost. And so when you get a job done correctly the first time, and you maybe use upgraded materials or that kind of will ensure that job doesn't have to kind of come back. And I'll give you a great example. For years we'd go into builders and talk about some of their biggest pain points as it relates to finish. Like, what was their callbacks? Like, where'd they get it? Always was crack grout. Crack grout was like the number one issue. Well, we found that a lot of the subs and the builders were speccing a base grade grout.
Okay.
And all we said to them was that upgrade your grout. And they said, well, it's cost more money. Yeah, but upgrade your grout. If you upgrade that grout, and it's to a prism, for example, from custom, right? You upgrade to a prism grout. It's not going to crack post installation, and that year warranty period that you have out there, you're not going to get that callback.
Yes.
So go measure what it costs you to do that callback. Measure what it costs you to upgrade the grout, which will be pennies per square foot, and then tell me which one is actually more cost effective. And anybody who did the exercise came back and said upgrading the grout was way cheaper.
Yeah.
And so then the conversation turned into, are you really looking at everything related to the project? And so then can you sell that? And can you tell the customers, look, I charge more because I use upgraded materials. I use better grouts. I use better thin sets. I'm installing large format tile, so I'm using a clip system. And the reason why I do that is I'm going to level your floor. I'm going to use a prep application that's going to basically make that floor, that you could, it's going to be perfect. So I'm using different materials than the other person who's telling you they can install the same floor for X. But now I'm explaining to you why my process costs more, because I'm actually going to make sure that you're happy with that particular job for life or for whatever. I mean, you're never going to be dissatisfied with that floor because that's a tile floor that should be a 25 plus year floor. You're never going to be unhappy with that floor because I'm using the proper materials to do this install. I'm using crack isolation. I'm using whatever it is you're talking about. So So when you talk about your install, a lot of people forget the details, right? And again, it goes back to storytelling. And you can talk about, if you're doing tile on your website and you're kind of talking about it, you can list those details that you actually utilize. You're going to prep their floor properly. You're going to level that floor. You're going to basically drop it in with the higher grade grout. You're going to use the right thin sets of materials. And you're going to paint a story that basically tells you that not only are you doing it correctly and you're doing it right, but maybe the competitor who's actually not doing it doesn't have those same features and benefits. And you're going to start questioning as a consumer, all right, it's cheaper over here, but I don't see them listing all these really cool features that they do with their installation practice. So I'm probably not getting it, am I? And there's a psychological component to that people need to explain, and they need to get into consumers' heads that says, because I tell you all the extra things that I do, my competitor's not telling you those things, therefore they're probably not doing it. And therefore I'll pay more money here.
Yes. And I think it goes down to, I'm always been an advocate of, like, give away the keys to the kingdom. I don't have a problem with telling you exactly how to install it. Like, if I'm going to put luxury vinyl plank in a room and they're doing a rectangle, I'll tell them, like, you can probably do this yourself. Like, I'll tell you how to do it. I don't care. Because there's no loss in it for me. What they don't understand is how to get around the corner and into the next room and underneath the door jamb and then run it backwards and into a closet. And they don't understand the floor prep. And if you educate somebody and they can make an informed decision, I find it much easier to be able to close that deal, because once again, the other people aren't doing it. They're coming in and they're giving you this quote and they're saying, we're going to put the carpet down. It's going to be beautiful, whatever it's going to be. It's just a quick, here's this, that, it's all measured. Here's a number. Okay. But what do I get with that? If you give away the information, the DIYer was never your client anyways, but
by the way, it doesn't matter. They still can't do it. They still can't do the quality.
Most likely not.
Right.
Most of them can't. But do they have? They're going to do it anyways because they want the. I just went through this with my brother-in-law, and he's going to sand and finish his own floors in the home they just bought, and he's going to put some LVP in the upstairs. He does not want to wait for me to come at Christmas and do it because they just want to move in and be done. I said, right. Call me if you have questions. Go talk to this person. She should be able to hook you up with a deal for some flooring. Good luck sanding and finishing. Good luck. Yeah. But the DIYer was never your client. But if you can give them some information that will help them be more successful, they may have friends that are your ideal client. Help them. Mm-hmm. It's not going to hurt you. They're not going to run off and open up a business. And if they do, at least they have better information than they're probably finding on YouTube. Not that there's not great YouTube channels about flooring installation, right? But like, if you give people the information, they're going to come back to you. So I've always been an advocate of like, I'll give away the keys to the kingdom. I don't care. You're either going to buy it or you're not. But if you do, at least you can make the informed decision to say, look, I know what Kyle's bringing to the table and I know what party X is bringing to the table. And so, yes, Kyle's more expensive, but you know, I don't think I need all this stuff. So I'm happy settling over here. Right. But now they at least know what they're doing.
But let's talk about client acquisition too. So, you know, you talk about the DIYer is not your customer, and then you talk about the consumer that is your customer. And part of this is when you get into an online presence, you know, this goes back, we'll bring it back to e-commerce a little bit. Mm-hmm. When you've got an online presence, you know, one of the things you want to do is make sure you will want to, at times, try to maximize who's seeing your website. And so if you're going to do an SEO exercise, one of the things I would really encourage people to do on the SEO exercise is, first and foremost, know exactly what you're trying to accomplish with it. Because there's a lot of companies out there that will say, I'll get you SEO and I'll get you search, I'll get you optimization. Mm-hmm. But you don't really set the boundaries, you don't set the landscape in terms of what you're trying to get. And they overspend because they're casting a much wider net than you need to be casting versus a very focused exercise when it comes to SEO. And you know, it could be everything from zip code to businesses to et cetera. But what you really want to get to is a refined search so that you're getting your presence in front of the right customers. Mm-hmm, and it doesn't have to cost a fortune to do that. It'll cost a fortune if you kind of don't give direction and you don't tell people exactly what you're trying to get, or you don't hire somebody who is, I'll say, more new school SEO than old school SEO. And new school to me is people who are refining and tinkering and playing constantly as they're doing your campaign versus setting a campaign and sitting back and waiting for results. Mm-hmm. So you can and you're doing, like I said, fine-tuned tinkering as you're kind of finding those results to get the hits that you want. So for me, that's how you get those client acquisitions. You get your clients at a higher level if you're going to kind of have an online presence, to kind of get the right people into your door that are actually listening. Because the other thing that I'm a big proponent of is that, listen, there's an ROI to your time. It's the most valuable asset you have, mm-hmm. Is your time. And wasting time with things that aren't going to, let's call it, the juice isn't worth the squeeze, right? Where things that are, you're chasing these rabbit holes that aren't going to get you a return of what you want. And you need to figure that out as quickly as you possibly can. But refining what comes in the door versus just wide net casting, which will drown people. Actually, when you talk about this online exercise and really get people out there, and people will invest in the SEO and they'll do all the stuff, it can actually become a detriment to them because they find themselves in a position where they're fielding really bad phone calls, or they're feeling really bad leads, and they've got to follow up on them all, right? And they don't materialize or matriculate into what they want them to be. So I would absolutely encourage people, if they're going to do that exercise, spend a little bit more time and energy around customizing what you want that search to be, and refine it and limit it until you figure out what works. And once you find out what works, then you dial up the knobs in terms of pushing that direction, versus starting off super, super broad, having a bunch of crap come in, that you don't want to deal with, and that will keep you in your room at night, quoting a bunch of jobs that aren't going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's a great point, because I've recently started looking at, like, originally I had this vision in my head and I was like, I want to open up a retail shop, have multiple crews, salespeople, operations people, all this fun stuff, maybe do 5 to 10 million a year. And I'm starting to look at some of the retailers that I know that are hitting those numbers in Phoenix, and that's awesome. I run your business. But what I've realized is I think a lot of retail shops have to take low-end, mediocre work. Occasionally they get some higher-end custom stuff. They have guys that can pull it off. And I'm over here trying to develop this business model that's like, I'm going to sell on quality and value. And, you know, I can do some more one-off stuff occasionally. But that pool of people is smaller. So now I've started looking at, is that pool of people available to do 5 to 10 million, or can I only scale to 2 million a year? But then I can just have that pool of people that are willing to pay more, and then I don't need as many people, but maybe the profit margins are higher. So
right. But you bring up a really good point. Yeah, which is know what your capacities are. Mm-hmm. I mean, most companies will they'll get into trouble because they outkick their coverage, right? So they take more work than they can actually handle, and then they get into a position where they're disappointing clients, and then that referral business doesn't kind of play. So knowing what you can handle, right, is really important, and it's not an easy equation, because you want to stretch yourself a little bit, right? I think at times, and you don't want to undersell yourself, because then you lose your trades, mm-hmm. you know? So, but, you know, it's that mindset of don't oversell times 2, thinking that you'll figure it out and customers will just wait and then you'll put them on back order. So really knowing what your capacities are and what you can handle is, I think, a critical, you know, in terms of all these exercises. So, you know, and when you're just starting out, you're like, oh, shoot, I just need work, right? Mm-hmm. But as you start getting established and you know what you've got, and again, go back to the home building industry. This happened in the home building industry, where you had these really large subcontractors. They'd figure out that they could install 1 million homes a year, 100,000 homes a year.
Yeah.
Well, if they had clients for 150,000 homes a year, they had to start going back to these deals and saying, the bottom 50, I can't do your work anymore. I can only handle 100,000. You know, and mm-hmm. so that's really where customers, you know, that's where it gets complicated, and you don't ever want to walk away from business and customers and relationships, but you also don't want to be in a position where you take on more than you can handle, and then the work starts suffering because you have to kind of take shortcuts, et cetera, and then your proposition of brand and quality goes out the window.
Well, so, Bob, I think you nailed it when you said, like, when you were talking about doing the SEO stuff, and you have to kind of refine this message and this net, right? Like you can't keep going down this path you're going down running your business. And it doesn't matter if we're talking about e-commerce, how you install the industry standard, everything gets refined. And it's like you said, right? You get stuck in, well, this is the direction I'm going. I'm just going to keep going this way and this way and this way, and I'll figure it out. I'll figure it out later. You can't figure it out later. You got to figure it out now, because if you're not headed in the right direction, you're going to run yourself into the ground. You're going to burn out. You're going to sell too much work. You're going to stop getting the referrals because you're not delivering on what you said you would, or you're going to overwork your crews and they're not going to want to work for you anymore. There's so many different factors. And so we have to constantly be refining and learning. I mean, in 7 years, I've gone from guy that knew nothing about this industry and cold called 30 contractors trying to find a job, to now I host this podcast and talk business with people, and I have a couple of mastermind groups I'm doing along with it, and then I have the installation business that's gone from I was somebody's employee to I was selling my own installs on the weekends to I got fired and I have to figure out how to get all my own jobs and pay my bills now, which was the plan, but I just didn't plan on getting fired at that time. And now I have this little boutique 255 square foot showroom I can bring people into. The dream of what's been there has been refined, redeveloped, figured out. How do I sell better? How do I communicate better? How do I provide the products that I want to be able to provide and not have to touch ones that I don't want to? And so that's really an important message behind all of this is that, one, we're communicating a story, but we have to look at the story. I was just out this morning and at a buddy's house, and we were talking, and he was like, "Man, I got to tell you, like, you're a really inspiring person." And I was like, "Wait, what are you talking about?" He's like, "Dude, I'm not trying to like blow smoke up your butt or anything like that. Like, seriously, like, I've watched you in this journey," and it kind of blew my mind, because for me, I'm caught up in the middle of it. It's really hard to step back sometimes and look at what you have to refine. So I get it. It's a business struggle, but we do need to find time to step back. And when he said that, I was like, okay, hold on. I was like, let me look. And yeah, 7 years, there's been a lot of changes in 7 years, and what I can bring to the table now versus 7 years ago, and in another 7 or 10 years. Like, what I know now, I'll look back and be like, man, I still didn't know anything, I think. So finding that time to really work on what you need to work on, and take that time. We get caught up working in the business instead of on the business. And Bob and I were discussing that a little bit before we even started recording. Like, it's tough. He's got a real estate investment business. He's co-owner, investor, and vice president at On3. And then he's got a family, and he's doing this podcast for me. Like, how many different directions can you get pulled, but still be able to focus on what's important and get it going in the right direction? And I think, knowing, if we're going to take it back to this e-commerce message that we're putting, I think it's know your message and stay true to it. And you may have to refine that message here and there, but don't accept anything.
Absolutely. And listen, you touched on entrepreneurship, right? So being an entrepreneur and kind of starting a business, and being your own boss is one of the great things about our country, right? And about just what we do. And it's awesome to see when people can start a business. They've got an expertise, and they just love what they do, right? And so part of that is fine. It's that passion, right? And so people have got passions within the industry, and I think our industry is full of people that are just passionate about this industry. They love what they do. And that's why they became entrepreneurs, and that's why they opened up a business, and that's why they're kind of servicing these industries where they've got a family business that they've now second generation possibly, and and so it's a really kind of a cool thing to see for me. And over 15 years, I watched even kind of generations come up, and families transition these businesses, and you got to see the younger kids are now adults and with their own families, and they kind of have now run the business. So that's a really an amazing thing. But the struggle of that entrepreneurship is that you got to run the business, you got to run the day to day, and this is where, again, it comes back to, you run the day to day. You have to deal with what happens with you every single day, whether it's the job, the customer, the issue, the complaint, the retail, the bills, etc. And then you've got these things where really the business planning, the strategic stuff that we've been talking about all day, all morning. And that's this conversation around how to get more, how to plan, how to refine, how to get my message out there, how to tell a story. And those are things that have to happen almost organically to some degree, but they also take some effort to kind of, to your point, you're saying, I got to go back to my website, and I got to go look at it, and I got to see what I'm doing right. That's time and energy. And so what I would just encourage people to do is, again, if that's not your skill set, keep surrounding yourself with good people who can help you do that, and know where they fit within your business planning process, so that you don't overspend and kind of do these things that aren't necessary. And if you're a startup, or you're still a business that's just trying to grow, just try to figure out where those refinements come from and where you want to invest in that energy, because it fits your story. And it fits what your business plans are for the next 2 to 3 years. And I don't say 5-year planning, because I think our industry has changed so fast that 5-year planning is really difficult to do right now, right? But I do think having a business plan in place that says, I want to get to X, and this is how I think I get to X, and it's going to contain these things, whether it's an online presence, whether it's social media, whether it's a bigger footprint, brick and mortar, whether it's additional salespeople, whether it's more installation crews. Just having that plan that says, I get from X to Y this way, and in order to do that, these are the things I need to outline. And having that as a reference material constantly, that not only you know it, but your team knows it, is where it all starts coming to play. Because if you hold it, if you put that down on paper, simple as it sounds, it doesn't have to be a thesis, But if you put it down on paper and you say, this is the goal, this is how we get there, and these are the steps we need to take to get there, and it includes these elements, and by the way, we're not good at these elements, so how do we get these elements in play? Now you know how to spend your money. Now you know how to be really tight with your money in terms of how you're doing these things, and you can be super focused with it and expand.
No, I totally agree. I think you get into running a business and you realize, oh, it's not I don't just make the widgets. I have to sell the widgets. I have to you wear 30 hats instead of the one hat you were wearing when you were an employee for somebody. And you get yourself into a lot of things you don't like. And I don't want to do a lot of the stuff that I have to do right now. But if I can find the expert that I can partner with very well, pay them for what they're good at, let them handle it, you can start getting certain things off your plate. And I think that's the key is let's find those people to help me be able to focus back on what I really want to do and grow, and then have this, you're talking about developing the roadmap and maybe having that 5-year goal in an industry that's changing very quickly right now. Doesn't necessarily work. I don't think it's bad to have that 5-year goal, the 3-year goal, and the 1-year goal, and you break them all down and you give yourself that smaller roadmap to be able to, okay, this week I have to do this. This is what we're doing in my mastermind groups is I have them setting year-long goals, but then they break them down into 4 quarterly goals, and then they break it down into those quarterly goals into the smaller, like we meet every other week once we get going. And so what little two-week bite can you take? And then another 2-week bite, another 2-week bite, and another 2-week bite. And then by the end of it, they're like, wow, wait, I actually did it. Like, but when do we take the time to do that? And these groups are forcing people to take the time to work on the business, which is absolutely huge. So once again, mind blown. I'm going to have to listen back to this one because there's so much in here. Thank you. You have been a wealth of knowledge, Bob. What I want to say is there something that I didn't ask you about? There's probably a million things I didn't ask you about e-commerce that we could answer, but is there something that maybe we didn't hit on that you think is really important to talk about?
Yeah, I think the only thing I'd probably talk to people about is as you get into just the construction of an e-commerce site, right? And really I would also tell people to encourage people to, again, it goes back to the beginning of just really make sure you know what you want that site to do, and that the format, the people that are developing it for you, the back end of it, really make sure you ask all the right questions getting into it, because the mistake a lot of companies will make is they'll sign up for a platform that doesn't support some of the things that they want to do 2 or 3 years down the road.
Okay.
And that they get themselves into a platform, it looks good, it shows off the products, but then they want to transact. And then the back end doesn't really allow for good transactions or whatever. So just make sure you have a vision when you start up this e-commerce kind of component of what I want it to be right now and what do I think I might want it to be down the road. And it doesn't matter if you're going to do it or not, but make sure you build it right the first time, because they're expensive, they're time consuming. They can consume your resources, your energy, your time, etc. And you want to build a platform that is going to last you for a good 5 years in terms of whatever it is you want to be doing. So that would be my number one advice to people is before you even get started, just know what you want.
Okay.
And know what you want to do, and make sure as you're building it that engine works for you long term.
Okay. Well, can we do so? Once again, this has been amazing, but this isn't what I initially intended it to be. Not even when we had our first conversation. So, will you come back and do e-commerce part 2, and we talk about actually building out, like, if I wanted to pursue selling flooring online, can we talk about what it would look like to build that out and put that in place?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, awesome. I think that'll be another great conversation. So we'll look at doing that.
I can't promise we won't go on more tangents, though.
Hey, that's what we're here for. That's honestly, that's where the beauty of this is it's you get the conversation that would happen at a convention over a drink, and the tangents are where the really good information comes from. Like that's what I found in doing this for 2.5 years at this point. Is the tangents are the beauty of it. If somebody wants to reach out to you, because I know there's at least one gentleman that wants to, based on a comment we got, how can they reach you?
They can email me at bob@on3.ai.
Okay. Awesome. I appreciate that. And
On3 is just ON, the number 3 at AI.
Okay. Perfect. Man, now I just, there's so much going on in my head. I'm not even going to lie. I'm like, I need to find time to stop running 2 full-time businesses at this point and get them both on track. Okay. Thank you, Bob. I very much appreciate it. Once again, wealth of knowledge. Appreciate all the insights. Folks, you could probably go back and listen to this 2 or 3 times and still pull a new nugget out of it every time. So let's do that. Like I said, I think I'm going to have to go back and listen to this. But
well, I appreciate it, and it's been a lot of fun, and happy to do it.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, well, we're going to have to set up talking about actually building out an e-commerce site, because I'm excited. I think the thought of it intrigues me, and I love the idea of it. I don't know that I love the idea of trying to handle what it would actually be. So I want to go through that and see what that would actually look like.
Great.
But I think that's going to do it for us. I think that's all the time we got for this week. Check out flooracademypod.com. I've got some awesome resources on there, whether you want to do profit tracking, figure out what you should be charging a day. There's a excellent form that you should be using to keep track of your tools and materials in case of an insurance claim. Head on over to the YouTube. You can watch the video version of these, like it, subscribe to it, please. Help me build up my subscriber count and my watch hours. Share that, like and subscribe. Check out the shop on the Floor Academy site. Get yourself a t-shirt. If you want to help support us financially, you can do so over at patreon.com/flooracademy. Even $5 a month goes a long way in helping me to continue to put this content together and get it out to you. If you're going to be at coverings and you're listening to this in the next couple of days, I will see you next week. I'm super excited to go and experience my first only tile specialty show, as I've only done surfaces so far. So I'm really excited to go and do that. Reach out, find me. I'll be on the floor. Can't miss me. And I think that'll do it for us, folks. We will catch you next week. Bob, thank you once again.